that sadly almost every day we hear of yet another attack on the API community, not necessarily in Orange County, but sometimes in Orange County, but certainly throughout the United States. And it's just simply hate. That's all you can say it is. And so what we are saying is, if you see something, say something, report it. We know these crimes are underreported. I believe the supervisor will speak to this. We do have some positive signs, of course, as some of you know, more vaccines are out, which means more openings of some of the places that we know are important in our community, whether it's restaurants, retail, even some of our tourism. Still have a long way to go, but we have been working closely, as I'm the chair of the Arts and Entertainment Committee, to work closely with the governor's office to make sure that the guidelines are clear, that we make sure that our partners, for example, in the wedding industry, get clear guidelines so they can start to open. And we were happy that some of our work was presented on Friday, this last Friday, saying that private events, wedding events can now start to be planned. And I know I have 3 wedding invitations on my counter of some of the weddings of our daughter's friends that had been put off. So I think there's some good, hopeful signs. We still have work to do in that area. We know that there's still some industries that are very much impacted. Some of you might be runners or endurance runners. We know that they haven't had the same type of relief as far as guidelines. We want to see our big orchestras, Sigerstrom, and our orchestras opened. We want to make sure our theaters can plan for the fall season. So we are still doing quite a bit of robust work. And I'll just wrap up right here and then introduce our guest with, I just had the opportunity of, over what we call our legislative recess, which is spring break, basically. I was able to participate in what we call the Golden State Tour. And we started in Sacramento, pretty much went all the way up to where the Rim Fire happened quite a while ago, but all the fires that took place last year. We were looked at climate resiliency, which we're now talking about, not climate change, but resiliency, meaning climate change has already happened. We're there, whether people agree on that or not, we're there. So it's now how do we work with that? We were out at Biomass Farm, looking how we use basically cow manure or cow poop for energy. We looked at water sheds, not only your typical ones that were kind of hardscape to now the more natural ones, which are now bringing back habitats and wildlife. But we certainly have heard throughout the state, we are in a drought. So we need to go back to those ideas that we are in a drought. And then finally, we ended up looking at some water systems up in Lancaster, where the city is actually producing energy and now selling it. So cities are going to have lots of opportunity to rethink how they operate and how they use energy and so forth. But with that, let's go ahead and get to our special guest. Sorry, I have my window open and now we've got the trash going by. So what else could happen today? I have had the opportunity to work directly and indirectly with supervisor. I mean, at one point he was a supervisor, he was an assembly member, but now District Attorney Todd Spitzer for well over a decade. And he even served in the state assembly. And I know that throughout those years, I've always found him to be not only hardworking, but, you know, at the front of many, many issues that we know are important to Orange County. So with that, I am looking through my notes here, and I'm just going to let our supervisor and a supervisor, if you'll just give a little bit of background that I know I'm missing here, because of course my notes aren't accessible. So let me
Assemblywoman,
just welcome our supervisor, District Attorney Todd Spitzer. Welcome to our Breakfast Club.
Oh, you're so nice. Thank you for waving. Thank you, Joe. And Hilda, I haven't seen you in so long. It's so good to see you. And thank you for your service as a trustee in North County. That's so, first of all, it's great to be here. And I want to thank you all.
Down, so that has been wonderful.
If everybody could mute, Yami Martinez, if you could mute. I don't mind calling out people when they don't get on Zoom. She'll figure it out in a second. Oh, there she did. Okay. So first of all, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for your leadership. A lot of people don't know that both of us were classroom teachers. We come from very strong public education backgrounds. We were both educated in the public education system. You went to Cal State Fullerton, got your teaching credential. I became an emergency credential teacher after I graduated from UCLA, and then I went on to law school after that. But everything starts with our whole community, and I believe everything starts with our education system. And part of we're going to be talking later on in this conversation about hate crimes. I just filed my first anti-Asian hate crime in recent years, and that press release is up on our website. But unfortunately, a young man, quite frankly, in his 20s, threw several rocks at a Korean American woman driving her car with her child in the car, and one rock deflected and the other went through her windshield, which, as you could imagine, would scare the heck out of anybody. Somebody shattering your windshield. She pulled over. She called the police, and he was arrested. And we filed a hate crime against him, and he's looking at potentially up to 6 years in state prison. And of course, we're going to talk about this more in depth. But what I want you all to appreciate, I've been the DA only 2 years, and the previous DA was there 20 years, and a lot of things occurred in that last 20 years. Everything doesn't change overnight, and we're being very, very responsive to the community. So, for example, many of you know that I agreed when I was a board of supervisor, 3rd supervisorial district, to build the first homeless shelter in my district. And it's on Kramer Place in the city of Anaheim. And as a result of building that shelter under the auspices of Judge Dave Carter, who has been overseeing all these federal cases, we were able to move individuals off the riverbed next to Angel Stadium and offer them shelter. We opened up the Santa Ana shelter, and we were slow as a county. I mean, look, one of the things I think many of you can appreciate about Orange County, if you've lived here a long time, I've been here over 30 years since I graduated from law school, is that we're a developing county, and now we're a real county. We're an urban county. We have density, we have urban problems, urban issues. We're living together as a complex community like never before. It has its challenges, but because of the good work of your Assemblywoman, and I think the good work of the District Attorney's Office and our partnership with everybody who's in elective and non-elective office, we're working together to solve problems. I think it's so refreshing for me to be invited to this event because I have such a great relationship with the Assemblywoman, but everybody needs to know that your office holders can work together to solve problems. So we built the first homeless shelter in my district. Then we had no mental crisis center. We didn't have a place, at least a government crisis center, where we could take people who were in crisis and having some kind of psychological event or physical event that resulted in a psychological, say, paralysis. So I stepped up again and said, let's build it in my district. So we did that, and now we have the Be Well Center, which is down near the intersection of the 5 freeway and the 55 in kind of a quasi-industrial office building area. And the city of Orange has been a great partner in that. Fullerton has stepped up in a significant way. Placentia is doing great work. Anaheim has a dual 911 dispatch pilot program, where instead of dispatching the police to a 911 call under the appropriate circumstances, they're dispatching mental health crisis response people trained on dealing with people in crisis. Because we know when the police come and somebody's in crisis, it often escalates the situation and results in officer-involved shootings, and many, many times people who just needed mental health intervention ended up seriously injured or dying. And that's one thing, and I'll close with this, at least in my introductory comments. We had a terrible, horrible, no words to describe, mass shooting in Orange last week. And many of you may have seen my responses to that. And now that case is now with us. We have now filed 4 counts of murder, 3 counts of attempted murder, 2 of those being police officers. A 9-year-old child was killed at that location and had his whole life ahead of him, as well as the adults. And it's just a horrible, horrible, horrible tragedy. And Sharon knows, I mean, the burdens that she's dealing with as a legislator. When you're in elective office, you're called on to solve and deal with really important, heavy issues that influence and affect people's lives. And now I'm responsible for prosecuting and dealing with this individual. And it's a heavy burden on me. I mean, it is going to be a life-changing event. And I just want you to know and appreciate that these things do affect somebody even like me, who's been doing work like this for over 30 years. Every day a victim comes through the door, whether it's the woman who had a rock thrown in her windshield or people who have lost a loved one through a senseless shooting. These people all deserve justice. And Assemblywoman Quirk Silva hosted an event we had, I'm sure we're going to talk about it, where we brought the community together in Fullerton on a Saturday several weeks ago. And we joined in solidarity to say we are not going to allow hate. We will not tolerate hate. Hate will have no place in our community. And that is a statement I've said for years since I've been elected and held this office, but I've always believed in that. And we're trying to send a strong statement. You will not be allowed to nor engage in hate crimes in this county. So Assemblywoman, back to you, and looking forward to our conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And we have, of course, several questions, but I did want to interweave some of the things that you've already said, because one of the things that is unique in your leadership is that you've held different roles, and with each role that you've had, whether it's as a county supervisor, state assembly member, now DA, what are, just as kind of a top level, if you can just give us a synopsis of some of them. You already have mentioned a few of the crimes that you'll be prosecuting, but what are some of the areas that you really see either that the county needs to, county, city, state, and your office could do better at, where you kind of see some gaps that you know, throughout all of these jobs you've had, you say, hey, if we really did this, it would be make a big impact? Or, as you've already mentioned, some things that we're doing well, and then we'll head into some of the questions.
You know, I think we need to do a much better job with our mentally ill and those who are addicted to substances. How our society has responded to that has been carceral. That's what's resulted in mass incarceration, which I'm completely against. I believe that the system should be reserved for the most serious offenders. But the individuals who are having a mental health crisis, or they're addicted to drugs or alcohol, or they have mental illness in their family. My cousin Patsy was born as a twin with my cousin Jane. Jane was fine, but Patsy became a paranoid schizophrenic. And I lived with her dad when I was in law school, and I saw the trauma that Patsy, really created in the family, because when she was not taking her meds and she wouldn't take her meds, she was really, really difficult, and she would engage in violence against people randomly. And it broke my uncle's heart, my grandmother's brother who I live with. And it was very, very difficult for our family. And so I really understand firsthand what mental illness can do to a family and a community. And we cannot lock people up because they're mentally ill. But we also don't have the proper places, the right kind of treatment and intervention to deal with that. That's why I'm so pleased, and I'm hoping that the Be Well Center in the city of Orange is going to be a place where we can take people when they have an interaction with the police, at least when the family calls and their loved one's out of control and they don't know what to do and they think they might harm themselves or harm the family, is that we can get that person into crisis treatment in a safe and humane way. So I think we've got to do a better job there. We've been slower than I like on the homeless issue. I think when you drive, I go to LA, my daughter played travel softball. So, we've been all over, I've been all over Southern California for games. And some of the communities are unbelievably affected by the homeless population. We saw what happened in Echo Park in Los Angeles and how that had kind of exploded until the council decided to go in and do something about it. And then they got criticized for it because there wasn't a humane way to treat that particular population. So we've got to get our act together as a society, and we've got to prioritize what's important to us. I am obviously the head lawyer in the county on prosecuting people who commit crimes, but I'm also the one who is able to lead the conversation that when you are engaged in the criminal justice system, we're going to put you into some kind of program. So I started a recidivism reduction unit. We're working on a mental health division in the district attorney's office. We have a conviction integrity unit, which allows us to look at old convictions and look at new evidence if somebody was wrongfully convicted. We have an ethics officer to hold our prosecutors accountable as to their conduct, because sometimes prosecutors are overzealous in their prosecution. And the last thing I'll say in answering this first question is, I have an open door. Now, I'm not allowed to talk to people who are charged with crimes because that's unethical. That lawyer, I cannot talk to somebody who's been charged, but I can talk to their lawyer. And I talk to lawyers all the time who represent those who have been charged with crimes to try to work out a disposition that is in the best interest of the community, the victims, but the defendant. And I want you to know, Assemblywoman Quirk Silva, we always look at what's in the best interest of the defendant. We are not just charge, throw away the key office anymore. That changed when I took over 2 years ago.
Thank you. And you mentioned two areas that I'm spending a lot of time in that same exact space, and that's working under mental health and homelessness. And you are exactly right that really, and some people disagree with this, and I understand that, but because of Judge David Carter, Orange County has been forced, and I don't like to use that word because nobody likes to be forced to do anything, but to really confront and examine what we have been doing as far as our policies from the local level, from the county level, even within schools, to address our homeless population. We've seen a huge growth in the last decade, of course, and very much with the economic status of California being the fifth largest economy in the world, then to also see us have the largest homeless population across the state of California. But Judge David Carter really stepped in with the Angel campground, if you want to say. It wasn't the Angels, but it was on the riverbed by the Angel Stadium. And because of that work, was able to bring cities, regional parts of the cities, as we call it, the North Spa, the Central Spa, and the South County Spa, and bring them to his courtroom to say, how are we going to solve this? Now, it hasn't been perfect. There's still a lot of work to do, but it certainly has addressed some of the issue. We have a long way to go. You mentioned in your beginning comments that Fullerton, Buena Park, Placentia, Anaheim, the North Spa, and spa for those who are listening means service provider area. They have really, really stepped up and are doing everything from shelters to, we have the Illumination Foundation in Fullerton, which is not just a shelter, but it's also provides healthcare, so on, and much more. But we need everybody to do their part. And that's where we need all cities, whether it's San Clemente to Mission Viejo, and this is not me saying they're not. I'm just saying if everybody takes their role, we will not be pushing it from one place to another. Just this weekend, I traveled through Los Angeles, also coming back, and some of you who could not help but notice the many, many camps on our freeways, on our bridges. This has to be addressed, and it's always easy to start with, well, Orange County sending all their homeless to us, or they're coming from this place or not. But I'm really positive that we in Orange County are not shirking our duty and that we're taking it seriously, but we need every single partner to do their part. And then that alleviates it being pushed on from one city or region to another. So that's really important. I also have had bills in this area and will continue to. I just have moved forward with a bill related to MHS funds, that those funds can also be used for addiction. And I hope you'll hear that, because we all too often have separated the population of homeless, saying, well, if they have mental health issues, we can help them. But if they have addiction issues, they've got to go over here. And the truth is, that is a issue that we have to be able to treat together as a co-occurring condition, and this legislation will allow us to do that. So I'm very excited about that. The Mental Health Commission of the state just endorsed that bill. All right, so let's go ahead, and then Joseph, I think I'll just, why don't you go ahead and ask the questions?
Okay, not a problem. So I do want to thank Todd Spitzer for joining us today and addressing what has been a growing concern of the Stop Asian Hate. In the Stop Asian Hate movement, one of the major questions that we've been receiving is, do you have any plans to reactivate the AAPI Advisory Committee to empower the Asian American and Pacific Islander community to address the related issues regarding law enforcement and hate crimes done towards AAPI?
Is that for me?
Yes.
Yeah, so I actually have those ongoing advisory groups, and I would urge you to email me. It's pretty simple. It's just todd.spitzer@da.ocgov, so ocgov.com, if you're interested in participating in our outreach community advisory groups. I need all the advice I can get. And that's not, you don't hear politicians talk about, oh, I have weaknesses, or I don't understand this and that. I'm perfect. And, essentially, right? That's not how politicians talk. But I've been doing this for over 30 years. And I'm at the point where, I'm looking at what I did before and how I could do things better. And it's probably just through darn maturity that I don't need to be as defensive as I used to be. And I want all the input I can get to make our community better. And I cannot understand every single community and their nuances. There's real interesting nuances. Like, for example, I participated in anti-Asian hate candlelight ceremony in Garden Grove. And I was talking to somebody and I turned a particular way, and I found out I turned inappropriately. There was an altar there, and it was paying tribute to the victims. And I inadvertently turned the wrong way. I would never do that, but I wasn't sensitized to that particular issue. So we all can learn and we can all get better at what we do. So I want that input. And if you would like, actually, Stephanie is on this call, Stephanie Hugh, H-U. She'll type into the chat her email, my email, and we'll share that with everybody. And if you'd like to participate, we'd love to have you.
Wonderful. So the next question in which we have received is in regards towards the stance of the Orange County DA on human trafficking. Organizations such as OCHTTF are working hard on trying to address this concern. I know that in the past, the Orange County DA has been focused on this concern. And if you have any insight or further explanation on how we're addressing this.
Well, I don't know who set me up for that softball question, because we're having a press conference today at 1 o'clock in Anaheim with our human trafficking task force. And we're releasing the annual report. And there's a story about that on the front page of the Orange County Register today. So let me tell you what it used to be like. When I was a DA, I started as a prosecutor. Now I'm definitely going to give away my age. In 1990, okay, so 31 years ago, I started as a baby DA in the DA's office. And when I was prosecuting misdemeanors, the in-court custody holding area for arraignments, where the person gets told the charges, there'd be a lot of women who would get arrested in Anaheim Buena Park, especially in that corridor where Knott's Berry, that whole Harbor Boulevard corridor, which has a lot of issues, and our human trafficking task force spends a lot of time there. And we would be prosecuting and putting in jail. There's male prostitutes, but at that time, it had been largely made up of women prostitutes. And when you look at prostitution, it's mostly female. They're victims now. The voters of the state of California made it very clear that this is not a victimless crime, that there are pimps and panders out there who exploit those sex workers for financial gain. So instead of looking at, when I started in law enforcement, as defendants, they're now victims, because it's their bodies that get exploited for financial gain by other people who control these bigger enterprises. So we are very, very aggressive about, although the pandemic has made it more difficult, as you could imagine, but we're much more aggressive, and we continue to be, and I think you have to be, not just because this kind of crime is going on, but it is absolutely outrageous to victimize the sex workers who are being exploited because they're in this particular area. And then once they get into this business or this lifestyle, there's all kinds of psychological torture and other financial torture that keeps them, these tentacles around them. And it exploits women who get brought here unlawfully from other countries, who are poor, don't have family connections and other connections in the community. So they become reliant on these pimps and these panders who can exploit them. And then they need to earn some money to support themselves. So as sex workers, they get exploited. That revolving cycle needs to stop. It's really exploitive of women in particular. And so, yes, we are still very assertive about it. And we'll be talking a lot about it today at this event later on this afternoon.
Wonderful. And to kind of, piggyback on the reciprocal situation of this is that the question now has become on a procedural matter. As we've seen a lot of hate crimes take place, a lot of our individuals are curious as to what are the steps that are necessary in regards towards if an individual, such as the shooting in Orange, what will be the repercussions for that, death penalty, and just kind of what the criminal procedure is for these actions.
So let me talk about hate crimes first, because there's a lot of attention on hate crimes. And when the women were gunned down in various locations at various massage enterprises in Atlanta, the greater Atlanta area in Georgia, there was an immediate call for that. That's a hate crime, right? Because there was 2 other victims, but I think six of the women were Asian. And so there was a national call. This has to be a hate crime. I absolutely believe that was a hate crime, and he absolutely targeted that population. So I didn't have any issue with that analysis. But let me give you an example that just happened in our backyard. A woman stabbed an Asian woman. I don't know her descent, the suspect, but she stabbed an Asian woman in Riverside I think it was last weekend or in the last couple of days. Maybe it was Friday of last week, but it doesn't matter. And she had recently been let out of jail for some other event, and now she stabbed an Asian woman. And of course, everybody said, okay, that's a hate crime. And the Riverside County, I actually communicated with Mike Hester, and he's a DA, and they literally did the investigation and found that she just stabbed this woman because she's mentally ill and she has issues and she's violent towards people randomly. That this woman happened to be Asian, but it wasn't the motive for stabbing this woman. So we have to go through an analysis. I wouldn't say it's necessarily complex, but it can be depending on the facts. Now, in the crime where a guy throws a rock at a Korean American woman and makes statements about Koreans as his motive, that's not going to be difficult. What's going to be difficult is what's going on inside his head that he committed that crime, and why does he think, these kinds of thoughts. And so there'll be mental defense issues in that case, but that's how we deal with the disposition later on down the road. with respect to the situation in Orange, look, I'm the one person in the county. I'm the only person in this county that makes the ultimate decision about whether we're going to bring charges, not whether the person will get convicted. That's a jury, but whether we're going to charge somebody with death. And that is an immense responsibility. And I'm required under the law and morally, it's in the law, but it's also my moral composition to look at the entire situation. So I'm going to be looking at the criminal history of any of the person who was a shooter. What was the motive with respect to his conduct? How many people did he kill? This was a multiple homicide event. 4 people were killed. 3 he tried to kill. 1 is in the hospital, and she had to undergo, serious surgery. She was the one that was trying to protect her child. Her child succumbed to the injuries, 9 years old. That pulls at my heartstrings in a very different way as a dad who's had 2 kids, right? And what do you think about kids getting killed? I mean, adults are horrendous. And then when you think of school shootings, I just want you to appreciate, I've got to weigh and balance this. I have a committee that will look at all this of experienced prosecutors. They make a recommendation, and I can either follow it or not follow it, depending on what their recommendation is. So there's a very deliberative, laborious, and important, in-depth process. I will meet with the victims. I'll find out what their beliefs are. Some people do not believe in the death penalty for moral, religious, practical reasons. Some people think it'll never happen in California. Some people think it's too expensive. Some people think we should not even have it in California. But it is a law, and it was recently reaffirmed by a majority of Californians. So it's still the law, and the governor has a moratorium, but his moratorium only lasts as long as he's in office. So these cases generally take anyway 25 years to fully prosecute. So I guess you can see that this is a complex blend of major factors. And we're going to take our time, and we're going to do it very, very carefully.
Wonderful. So to kind of do a brief transition, obviously, with public safety being at the forefront of all of this, we do also want to address affordable housing and homelessness. As you have mentioned, you have worked in the past, but also for the Assemblywoman to address a few of the legislative updates in regards towards her bills and trying to work with our mobile homes and affordable housing here in Orange County.
You want
Go
me to
ahead.
start? Okay,
Yes,
go ahead.
and
Go ahead.
I'll follow.
Oh, okay. All right, great. So a lot of work I did as a county supervisor was at the forefront, at least for Orange County. I have already acknowledged that we were probably slow as an urban environment to recognize the kind of problems we were going to have. And over the last few years, last 5 years, there's been a significant investment. And to the Assemblywoman's point, all the cities are now, or most of the cities are rowing in the same direction. And she's right. If certain cities take care of their populations, which they have an obligation, then those individuals can be helped in that community. If certain communities don't take care of their population and services emerge in an adjacent geographic location within Orange County, people are going to move to that city and overburden those cities that offer resources and benefits. So it's unfair. It needs to be a program for the entire county. I don't know if anybody remembers on the Zoom that I wrote the first article. I wrote an op-ed. I don't know if it was in the LA Times or the Register, but I talked about how David Carter, as a federal judge, was the catalyst to get us all to do the right thing. Because David married me, full disclosure, he married me and my wife 25 years ago. And he was a Superior Court judge before he became a federal judge, and I did trials in front of him. I was a prosecutor in front of him, and we became good friends. And then, of course, he performed my ceremony. And he's a very, very influential and very dynamic person. And knowing him as long as I have, I knew he was the right guy to help bring about a bunch of changes. So, but do we have housing insecure? Of course we do. Is Orange County a very, 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 very expensive place to live? Yes, it is. My son is a recent graduate, 22 years old, engineering degree from a very good school, San Luis Obispo Engineering Department. And he just got his first job, and he's working in your district, Assemblywoman in Anaheim. But his girlfriend had to go all the way to West LA. She's working at the VA administration. And so she's commuting, and they're looking for a place to live. and they literally cannot believe how expensive housing is for just a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment. So we have a very, very expensive cost of living, and it's getting more expensive. The pandemic, if you've been out to a restaurant since you've been able to, the price of everything has gone up at least 20%. And I want to help these restaurants. I want to support them. I want them to survive. I want to tip bigger because I want these workers to appreciate how much we appreciate their sacrifices while they were really dealing with difficult times. So we're going to have to figure out how to deal with affordable housing. We've done that through developer agreements. So when there was new housing, say, for example, in South County, when the Board of Supervisors still was approving housing, there's a state formula that requires certain housing within developments, planned communities, to be offset at affordable levels. We need to encourage that. We need to mandate it. We need to make sure it happens. So I'm all in supporting these efforts. And I'm also all in when we have a disposition in a criminal case, making sure one of the most important things in somebody's success on probation is that they get housing. If they're homeless and they're trying to comply with their terms and conditions of probation, they will not be successful. So housing is critical.
Thank you. And, housing is something that we have to go back at decades really to look at not only those that are housed, but to really look at the reality that many people will be renters for their entire life. I have a package of bills as I sit on the housing committee, which there are only 7 members, so it is a very impactful committee. We have hundreds of bills this year, but because of the pandemic in the last 2 years, many of those bills will not be given a hearing, as we cannot have that many bills go through our committee. So we've all had to pare down our list, but there certainly is quite a bit of, I think, emotion and effort that goes into people who bring housing bills, but in our community of, I think it's unbearable to go by a corner and see 2, 3, 5 people camping on your streets. So let me just talk about a few of the bills that I have. I have that's one bill that's already moved forward, AB 345, accessory dwelling units. This is a new space for some of us that are my age. We'd actually have called those granny units or mother-in-law units. And we did a fairly robust job in building those many decades again, and then they just stopped. These bills that we are starting to see are all in the attempt to bring those back. Now, there's many conditions. You can't just build like a 3-plex on the back of your lot. There's city ordinances, there's state ordinances, but it's to really start to look at the space we have and say, can we build these? And if we can, how do we work with local and state? So my bill particularly works directly with Habitat for Humanity that would say if somebody has a property and they want to, a choice, not a mandate, that they could convey it to a nonprofit, Habitat, or another nonprofit that's approved, then to build a ADU, and it would be conveyed to them as a separate property. So that is one. Another one I have is AB 1090, which is master plan on home ownership housing. What this says is if we look at housing, just take Fullerton's the largest part of my district. If you look at Fullerton in the sense of a quadrant, 4 parts of Fullerton, we know that many of our families, including my family, Latino, Black families, bought in many of the same neighborhoods. Now that was actually by design, because at that time in the 50s and 60s, many realtors would take certain families of ethnic backgrounds to the same neighborhoods to buy. This has happened across the United States, California, and you see neighborhoods. But the second part is we know that people of color many times had a very difficult time accessing capital. So whether it would be your traditional banking, whether it would be even VA loans, that many times those loans were not given to people of color. So this would in fact say that we know people generate wealth by being homeowners. It's the number one way people generate wealth is by having a home. And it would say we want to be very much focused and conscious and trying to help people of color attain housing by being homeowners. So it's a master plan bill. We have a lot of people who are supporting that. And then another one, and I have a handful, so I'm just going to do my top three. But this one is on shelters. We in Orange County, I have built shelters.
You want more? Sure.
But we know that even in the perfect world, no matter how much you try, sometimes things go wrong. So this would, in essence, try to improve conditions in shelters by making sure there's some oversight. We certainly don't want to house homeless people that are already in traumatic situations and then put them in another traumatic situation. So there would be some oversight. We have work to do on this. It's not an easy bill, and we don't want to make it more costly. But those are three of the bills that I personally have. There will be others, but again, as the supervisor, I'm sorry, I keep saying the supervisor, as the district attorney said, you know, we have to have housing production. And this is where we really get into trouble in many of our cities where everybody's like, yeah, I know my young adult needs to live here, but I really don't want my neighborhood to change. It's such a great neighborhood. So build that over next door. And the same city says that, and the same city that says that. And that's what we call NIMBY, not in my backyard. And the truth is, the more we do that, the less production. We know this from Economics 101, the less production, the less supply, the higher the price. And we have seen in the pandemic, the prices have not gone down in any way. We have people building on regular single family homes in Orange County, anywhere from 25 to 50,000 above the price. And so we have to do better for our workforce, and we have to be able to retain some of these students that we get going to our incredible universities here in California, and we don't want them all to leave. We want them to be able to work here and stay home, stay close to home. I have 4 young adults, just like the district attorney. I have 4. I have 1 who's out in Colorado, 1 that was in Seattle. They've come back, but it's very difficult for them to work and live in Orange County. All right, so we probably have time for a few more questions.
That we do. And so the next one coming up, and I'm sure that a lot of our residents would be familiar with this, is the EDD fraud struggles. As we've noticed, many individuals have had their identities stolen or have been having issues in being able to receive their EDD payments, whether it be a freeze on their account. And so what we want to know is there any way that the Orange County District Attorney can address this EDD fraud concern?
So I appreciate that question. You know, I'm very, very upset about what happened in the first round of the pandemic, federal government distributions that then came through the states. California got $113 billion. And EDD now believes that 30 billion, so just under 30%, was fraudulently intercepted to people who unlawfully got access to those dollars. And what's unconscionable to me is not only the loss and the criminal activity behind that, but that people who needed the benefits the most to pay their mortgage and pull through their restaurants and their other businesses, their nail salons, and all the people have been struggling and fighting to survive. I mean, think about it. We knew we were going to come out of this, and I just got my 2nd vaccination, thank goodness. And I hope all of you are deciding if you decide to get your vaccination. And we knew we were going to pull out of this, right? At some point, we're going to get herd immunity. We still have some issues, as you're all hearing. We still don't know, but we still think we're going to get past it. But people needed to emerge like the Phoenix and have their businesses survive. There are people who will never recover from this pandemic, irrespective of the distribution, because 1, they never got it, or it was too small to have much of an impact on their lives in the first instance. So I decided to go out and test the waters a little bit in Orange County and see how extensive the EDD fraud was here. And we started doing our research through my investigation bureau. Some of you may not realize I have 900 employees. I have 300 lawyers, 150 police officers, and the balance are support administrative. And so we have a huge operation, right? We have a $150 million a year budget. And we run the 3rd largest prosecutor's office in the state and the 6th largest in the nation. So like we're real players in this space we call prosecution, which is why all the things I talked about earlier about being reform-minded and being on the cutting edge of doing things better, it needs to start here in Orange County. What a great message, right? That we can do things better here in this county we call Orange County. So we went out and what we found is there were inmates in prison who were obviously not working and hadn't worked in years. They were applying for unemployment benefits. And they were coordinating the distribution of those fraudulent debit cards. That's what was distributed, like a debit card. And they were distributing those with people on the outside. And so we were able to arrest 2 of those people on the outside and the rings on the inside of the state prisons. And then we went and executed search warrants on a storefront in Garden Grove, Westminster area, where 2 individuals, entrepreneurs, decided to go out and recruit elderly their victims. Now they got deep debit cards, but these older people, unsuspecting, they were told just fill out this application. If you fill it out this way and check this box, do it online, you'll get $10,000. And we recovered $300,000 in cash. And we think they alone, that storefront with 2 individuals, that they took $20 million themselves in fraudulent EDD benefits. So if you extrapolate just a small test we did here in Orange County, and you extrapolate that statewide, now you know why it's $30 billion.
And I'll just add to that, our office and many other of the legislators' offices throughout the state have really become case managers in EDD, meaning trying to walk people through, trying to help them work with the state to get access. It has not been easy, particularly on the frozen accounts. For some of you, if any of you, the frozen accounts have been the most difficult, as the district attorney will know. They, Bank of America, who's actually the partner with the state, they actually had a 3rd partner that they've have dealing with the frozen accounts, but many of the people dealing are not here in California. So it has been really difficult to get those unfrozen, but we've had many, many small successes through getting access to the funds they need. So please contact our office if you're still having a difficult time. It is not easy. We've also been able to help many people, including restaurant owners, with accessing grants or loans. Those are still available. So we pride ourselves in that. That's a very important part of the job that we do, is navigating the state system. And it is not easy. One of the reasons, of course, that some of these people have been able to commit this fraud is we have old technology. There's a lot of work we have to do on technology. And as many of us have seen through our virtual world, everything from broadband to connectivity to old systems have really made things even worse. I do want to end on something that I'm not sure if she is still on the phone, but I know that trustee from Fullerton Elementary School District, where I've actually worked forever, contacted me, Hilda Sugarman, a good amount of weeks ago about, and it's kind of global in the sense of, if we look at the United States as a family, and we see what's happened not only in this pandemic, but actually on a national election, and take that down to our own communities, we very much are a nation and a state that can feel as if we're divorced, where we have such polarizing opinions about whether it was a national election, whether it's housing, whether it's infrastructure, any of these type. And it's become increasingly hard for us to even communicate. People just, it's a very much behind the screen attacks, and from even neighbor to neighborhood, community member to community member, you add in some of these groups, whether it's been attacks on API or on Jewish communities, Sikh. We have seen just so much of this happening. In the past, we've always had a very strong arm with the Orange County Human Relations. That has changed over the years. But one of the things that I think is important is that we do figure out how can we go back to disagreeing, to understanding we don't all come from the same type of experiences, but doing that in a way that's productive. And I am looking at putting together some type of, if you want to say, quote, dinner conversation. So really looking at people who don't always, because it's easy to talk to all your friends and that, that group is just out of control, or, oh, they don't know what they're doing. But it's harder to sit in a group of mixed company and really take one or two issues. So whether it's housing, whether it's our justice system, whether it's police, talking about your local police, these all get people extremely angry or agitated. And in essence, we just keep on the sidelines where we don't seem to have this way of how can we move forward together. So I'm looking at doing that. I will make sure if I do District Attorney Todd Spitzer that you are included, because I think your background lends it. But I wanted to mention that because Hilda's on the phone and I told her we would start to look into something like that, because it's difficult. You want to live in a community where you're not looking at sides. You're not looking at somebody by their race or ethnicity. You're looking at people in your community as neighbors and people that you want to understand more about versus they or them. And so that's something that I'm going to be moving forward on. I think District Attorney Todd, would you like to make any closing remarks?
Well, thank you so much. First of all, I just want to thank you for allowing me to have this opportunity. It was very, very kind of you and your staff, and thank you. I'll take exactly what you said, and I'll just borrow the baton from you for a moment. There is nothing worse. This is why hate crime happens, right? There's nothing worse than being a person and feeling that you're a target because of a set of factors you have no control over. We can talk, we can control our dialogue, we can control how we say things, we can control certain things we think about, but we can't control the color of our skin or what our eyes look like or whether our hair is smooth or not. Those are physical characteristics. We can't control our sexuality. And yet everybody in how you are born deserves to be free and loved and free to love whoever they want to love. And it shouldn't be with any society's judgment. So that's where I come in. Is my job is to make sure that people can walk our streets safely and feel that irrespective of any of their physical characteristics or their sexual orientation, that they'll be free to live and to love. And I'm prosecuting a man who beat up a transgender man in Costa Mesa with a skateboard because that person was transgender. And we know that our transgender community is some of the most vulnerable individuals in our community because of all the issues that they're dealing with and the struggles that are facing them. And so it's my job to protect them. It's your job to protect them. So I love this concept that we need to come together. I think honestly, Sharon, as a result of the pandemic, and when we can say congregate maybe at the Honda Center, we need to come together as a community. We need to open up that venue and we need to tell people as a community, we want you to join us. We need kind of a breaking bread post-pandemic event to really mark the fact that we do believe in our commonality, not our differences. We respect our differences, but that is not what drives us as a community. I want to be part of that. I want you to be part of that. I want to help put that event
You
on.
just
I'm
named
thinking-
it. You just named it. I was talking dinner conversation and you said breaking bread. So that will be the name of it. And maybe small, starting small, but again, breaking bread, because I really think that that model of coming together, as you said, irrespective of, you know, how we look, the languages we speak, the religion, that we have to get back to civil discourse. And so I really appreciate you joining us. I know it's
Thank
a
you so much.
busy time for you, and we appreciate your time. To those of you out there, thank you again. This is our version of, many times we say bringing Sacramento to you, but now this is bringing our district attorney to you, and we will continue to do that. Please contact us if you have any issues, and I want to thank my staff. We have several of our team members on. They are working tirelessly out there in the community for you as public servants. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, District Attorney Todd Spitzer.
Have a blessed day. Thank you.